before we start off, anybody has any questions, they can raise their hand and I'll be able to take the questions now. Okay, I guess no questions. We have come a long way through the course. We have covered most of our topics. There is nothing much to cover now, unless you guys have anything specific for me. Right, today what we are going to look at is VPC. Right, VPC is more like a networking concept, and I hope you guys have gone through the links that I wanted you guys to go through last weekend when we were talking about. I gave you a couple of links to understand subnetting. Right, I hope you guys have gone through. Juhi says she can't hear me. Can none of you people hear me, or only Juhi? Rupesh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Rupesh can hear me. So Juhi, that could be some problem with your machine, so you'll have to check that because others can hear me and not you. So obviously that should be a problem with your machine, I guess. So please go ahead and check that. Okay. Okay. All right. So we have looked at a lot many things so far. Today, what we are going to look at is VPC, right? And the last class, I asked you guys to go through a couple of links to understand what this subnetting is all about. Because today we are going to create networks, right? So for that, you need to know what I'm doing. So that for that, you will need to know subnetting. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for you people to understand. If you don't understand now, that's fine. Just bear with me and listen to the class. Probably then you can relook at the videos, and then probably it's going to all make more sense, right? So without any further talking about this, let's go straight into the VPCs. Okay, I'm in the wrong account. Let me log out of this account. Let me sign into my account. So I have signed into my account, and if I go to VPC, currently it says me that it says me basically. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Okay. It basically says that I have one VPC and 4 subnets and all of this stuff. We'll get into details of this stuff later on. But let's understand why VPCs, right? So for that, we'll just look at the product page. Okay. So the product page basically tells you why do you need VPCs, right? Basically, why do you need VPCs is, say if you want to create an isolated environments for your different applications, right? Say for example, I have an application like right? I have a, say for example, I have a 3-tier application. Normally the applications are 3-tier applications, right? Say I have some web service, and I have some application service, and I have some database service, right? So I have 3 kinds of service here. I want to have, say for example, these machines, the web service in a different network, and again these application service in a different network, and my database service in a different network. So far we have created the machines, but all of the machines were in a standard network, a standard VPC, the default VPC. But we never created machines in different networks altogether. Probably we would have used different availability zones. The availability zone is nothing but a subnet, right? So if you guys remember, we talked about this. I'm trying to explain this again, right? So for example, I have a region, right? Under this region, I have at least two availability zones, right? Say if these are two my availability zones, the network that covers the complete region is called as VPC, and the network and the part of the network which covers availability zone is called as a subnet. Right? A subnet is nothing but a subnet spans availability zone. A VPC spans a region, right? So in one say in one VPC you can have multiple subnets, right? In one VPC you can have n number of subnets, but one VPC is going to span across the complete region, right? So with VPCs, what you can do is you can create your own networks. By default, when we create a AWS account, what we get is a default VPC, and the default VPC address start from 172.31.0.0/16, right? Again, if you guys understand subnetting, this is all easy. If you don't understand subnetting, this is a bit tough, right? So we are also going to look at a bit of subnetting, but I don't want to explain subnetting in detail now, because this here we are not to learn about subnetting, but it's better if you guys know something about subnetting. All right, so let's look at this. Let's look at this product page. It basically has some information about why VPCs. So basically VPC means virtual private cloud. Virtual private cloud is nothing but a virtual private network, right? You can have your own different networks created. So what you can do is, say for example, when I created my AWS account, I get this IP address range. So whenever I launch an instance, the instance internal IP or the private IP will be 172.31 x.x something, right? But I don't like the series at all, right? I want to go for something like 10.0.0. Then I can, for that, I'll have to create my own VPC, right? So we'll look at how to create a VPC shortly. So you can say it says you can easily customize the network configuration for your Amazon private cloud, right? Amazon virtual private cloud. For example, you can create a public facing subnet for your web servers that has access to internet, and place your backend systems such as database or application service in a private facing subnet with no internet access. So even in one VPC, you can create different types of networks. One network can be a public facing network. Another network can be a internal network or a private network with no internet access, right? So we are going to look at that. And if you configure everything properly, normally for each instance, before a packet comes to an instance, it has to go through something called as security groups, right? We have looked at security groups, but at the network level, there is another layer of security called as network ACLs, right? Before a packet comes and hits your EC2 instance, it has to cross through something called as network ACL, and then it has to cross through your security group. Only then the packet is going to come to your EC2 instance. So that's going to give you multiple layers of security, right? And if I have an architecture like this, say if a packet is coming in, right? If a packet is coming into my network, the first hurdle that it has to clear is a network ACL, right? A network ACL is here. Then say if that packet crosses through this network ACL, then say if my instance is in the subnet, right? Say if my instance is in the subnet, I have multiple subnets here, say for example. Then before reaching to this subnet, it has to cross through another security layer, nothing but your security group. Only then the packet can come to your EC2 instance, right? Say for example, I have different networks like this, right? Say then what's going to happen is, even if a packet has to come from your web server to application server, again it has to cross two boundaries. Again there will be a network ACL, right, between the networks, and again there will be a security group before your instance. So even if somebody breaks into your web tier, right, even if somebody is able to break into, somebody has hacked your network, and if somebody has able to get your access to web network, if they have to get into your application network, again it's going to take a lot of time for them, right? If they are able to even get in your application tier, again you have one more layer to protect your data, right? So if somebody has to break into your database to steal your data, so they have to come all the way from here. They have to cross these layers, then again cross these layers, and again they have to cross these layers, and then only they'll be able to get into your database. So in this way, you can provide multiple layers of security. Okay, we're going to look at that. uh, Features and benefits, everything is here. Secure, simple use cases. Say if I want to have a public facing website, a multi-tier web application, which we're talking about, right? We're talking about a multi-tier web application. Extend your corporate network into cloud disaster recovery. So we're going to look at some of these things. Product details. Sorry. Actually, I'm a bit caught up with cold, so you could be here. You guys can hear me, uh, uh, all of the stuff. So ignore that. So VPC as such, right? VPC as such doesn't cost you anything, right? There are no costs associated with VPC, but there are costs associated with VPN, right? We are going to look at what is this VPN and all of this information in some time. So uh, before before talking any further, let's get into talking about VPCs. Okay, so when you first look at your VPC console, it will be something like this. So the first thing that you can do is you can click on Start VPC Wizard, or you can launch a EC2 instance. Right? If you launch a EC2 instance, again this is the normal cycle. We have already looked at how to launch a EC2 instance, so I don't want to get into that again now. Okay, so I don't want to get in there. Right? So what we can do right now is we can create a VPC, right? So what does that mean by create VPC? We are going to create our own network. The default network is this. The default network, when you sign up for a AWS account, you get this account, get this network. But if I don't want this network, I want my own network, then what I have to do is I have to click on create VPC. Sorry, we are going to come back to this also later on. But first, what we are going to do is there are multiple ways of creating VPCs. One is through the wizard. The next one is you have to do everything, right? Creating a VPC through the wizard is very easy. But if you have to create a VPC manually from the scratch, it's a bit difficult. Right? But we will also try to look at that. And hopefully, there are far too many steps in it. Hopefully, we don't hit any hurdles while creating a manual VPC. We'll try to make it as smooth as possible. Right. All right. So let's click on the Start VPC Wizard. Right. When you click on the Start VPC Wizard, you have four options. Right. You have four options: VPC with a single public subnet, VPC with a public and private subnet, VPC with public and private subnets, and hardware VPN access. So what is that? What is that they are trying to explain you here? Okay. Say there are four types of VPCs. Let's start from here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a VPC. Right. Say this is my VPC. The wizard will help you create a subnet also. Under this VPC, the wizard will help you create a subnet also. And this subnet or the VPC will have access to internet, right? I'm not able to find the multi-directional arrow, but say for example, this has connection to internet. Your subnet will have connection to internet. So if you want to host a web server, if you want to host only a web server, right? If you don't have any application servers or any database servers, all you have is a web server, and you want your instance to have an internet connection, then this is the one that you have to go for. Okay, so that is what is going to happen. You're going to launch a VPC. Under that, you're going to launch a public subnet. A public subnet is a subnet which has connection to internet, right? And that connection to internet will be given through something called as a gateway, internet gateway, right? Then we'll also look at gateways and all of this stuff in some time. Then you have something other called as VPC with public and private subnets, right? So in this, what's going to happen is this public subnet will be there. However, you will also have another subnet, and this subnet will not have connection to internet. This subnet will not have any connection to internet. So if I launch an instance here, say for example, in this subnet, if I'm going to launch an instance, right? And if I want to connect, say if I'm here, right now I'm here. Right now I'm connecting to my instances through internet. Right now I'm here. If I want to connect to this instance, I can go to internet, but I'll not be able to get here, right? Because this network itself, this complete subnet itself, doesn't have connectivity to internet. Okay, there is no connectivity from internet. So how do you connect to this instance? The only way that you can connect to this instance is first you have to connect to internet, then reach your public subnet. From the public subnet, because these machines are in the same network, right? From the public subnet, then you should be able to talk to your instance in a private subnet, right? So this is an ideal case for having, so these are my web servers, these are my application servers, right? My application servers need not be exposed to internet. Only servers that have to be exposed to internet are the web servers. You don't have to expose your application servers to internet. So in that case, you can have your application servers in a private subnet. So the private subnet doesn't have any connectivity to internet. Okay, you can create something like this. Okay, then the third option has, say you get public subnet, private subnet, and you get, say this is my traditional data center. Okay, this is my traditional data center, for example. I have a data center, right? So third option allows you to create this plus a VPN connection, right? A VPN connection to your a VPN. I hope you guys know what a VPN is. VPN is virtual private network. So that is normally say I have two data centers, for example. I have two data centers here, right? Say a data center is in Delhi and another data center is in Mumbai, for example. I have two data centers here. One data center is in Mumbai, another data center is in Delhi. Now if I want to establish a connectivity, what I can do is I can go for something called as private lines, right? I can talk to a telecom operator and I can get a private line. So direct connectivity from this data center to this data center. But these private lines are normally expensive, right? So if you don't want to go for these private lines, what you can do is you can use something called as VPN, right? Virtual private network. So with virtual private network, what's going to happen is from the internet, normally I use this symbol for internet, right? From the internet itself, it's going to create a virtual private network. Right? This is actually not a private network. This is a virtual private network, right? It's called as VPN. So from a public network itself, you are creating something called as a private network. And this is not actually a private network. This is a virtual private network. So for that, you need VPN software and all of that stuff. If you're going to use something called as a software-based VPN, you can also have specialized hardware for VPN. Then you're going to create something called as a hardware VPN. And here you can create something like a hardware VPN access. For this, you will need specialized hardware. So we are not going to look at this, right? So we are not going to look at this. And then there is another option called as VPC with a private subnet only and hardware VPN access. So if this is my traditional data center, right? And if I establish a VPN connection to my Amazon private cloud, right? Amazon virtual private cloud, Amazon VPC, then this will be as if these machines are on the same network. So now there is a direct link between my data center and my VPC. Once I establish a connectivity like this, now these machines will think that all of these machines are in the same network. They don't even realize that they are in a different network. So from the internet, I'm getting a private path, right? If any of you guys have used VPNs, you will understand this, right? Say most of the people, if you look at these days, they will log in from home, they work from home, right? Actually, they are not in the office network. Normally, you in the office, when you go to the office, you connect in the office network, but you're sitting at home. But then what you do is you use a VPN client to connect to your office network. So what are you doing there is from your office, from your laptop or from your desktop, from your home basically, you're connecting to your office using a VPN software, right? Which is going to create a private network through the internet for you, right? In those cases, you need a VPN, right? So all these four kind of networks can be launched using a VPC visitor, right? We are not going to we can't have a look at these two because I don't have any specialized hardware. So what we are going to do is we are going to start with this, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a VPC with a single public subnet, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on select. Now it's going to ask you a CIDR block. I hope you guys read about subnetting again. So it is going to ask you what do you want your network IP address range, IP address series, right? So what we are saying is we want, say for example, I want this 10.1.0.0/16. So I don't know how much you guys read about it, but so what does that mean is 10.1.0.0/16. So what does that mean is 10.1.0.0 slash 255.255.255.0.0, right? So what does that mean is whenever you look at an IP address, IP address is made up of four 8-bit blocks, right? And IP address is made up of four, say, I don't know, there are uh, 8 ones there. Say if an IP address is made up of something like this, right? I hope there are 8 ones there. So this is equivalent to 255.255.255.255, right? So whenever you look at a IP address, right, 10.1. An IP address will always have a subnet mask saying which part of the IP address belongs to the network and which part of the IP address indicates the host, right? So whenever you look at an IP address, say if I have an IP address something like this, 10.1.10. say 2/24, or that is equivalent to 255.255.255.0. So what does that mean is this part of the IP address, right? So 255, 255, 255. So what is this saying is this part of the IP address is reserved for network, right? This is saying this part is reserved for network, and this 0 or this last bit is for the computers or hosts or IP addresses in the network. So in this network, right? So if I have a subnet mask like this and if I have an IP address like this, so what does that mean is my network starts with here, right? My network starts with here and ends with this IP address. So in this network, I can have 256 IPs, right? I can have 256 IP addresses, but the number of IP addresses that I can assign to machines can be less than that. Okay, so there's a brief talk about subnetting. If you guys don't understand subnetting, I would highly recommend you guys to go ahead and read about subnetting, right? So basically what here I have to say is what will be my bigger network, right? So what will be my network? My network is going to be 10.1.0.0/16, and it will also say the number of IP addresses that you can have is 65,000, right? So what it is basically saying is if I'm going to use something like 10.1.0.0/16, right? If this is the CADR block that I'm going to use, the first IP address of this series is going to be 10.1.0.0, and the second IP address will be 10.1.0.1. Third will be 10.1.0.2, right? And if you continue so on and so forth, at one point you will reach this 1.0.255, right? And the next IP address will be 10.1.1.0, right? So as on when this hits 25, this gets incremented. So the last IP address will be 10.1.255.255. So in this series, so if I'm going to use this CIDR block, my network is going to consist of these many IP addresses. So I'm going to create a big network. Under that big network, I can have these many IP addresses. Okay, so I'm going to create a big block of network, and in that big block of network, I can have some 65,000 IP addresses, right? So you have to give a name for your VPC. I'll say public only, right? Just to make sense to me, I'll say public only VPC. Then whether do you want to use this complete bigger network, a big network of 65,000, or you want to break your bigger network into smaller networks, right? Generally, this big network is not preferred, right? This big network is not preferred because if you're going to have so many machines in one network, and if there are any broadcasts, or if somebody breaks into your network, it's going to cause a big problem. So what you want to ideally do is break this bigger network into smaller network. Okay, how do you do that? Is by changing the subnet mask. Okay, so let's create a smaller network here, right? My smaller network is going to be like this, for example, right? This is a bigger network. Under this bigger network, I am making a 251 IP addresses block as a separate network. So from this network, I am creating a subnet. From this network, I have cut a branch of it, and I'm making it a separate network. Sorry, a subnetwork. Under the bigger network, I'm making a smaller network. So this spans my VPC, and this spans my availability zone, right? And which availability zone this should belong to, you can choose. So for example, I'm going with USH 1B, right? And what you want to name this subnet, I'll also give a tag which will help me identify 10.1.0.0, and this is going to be my public subnet of 10.1.1.0. This is just for me to identify, and ignore this. Add endpoints S3 to your subnets. So say if you have a private subnet, normally S3 buckets are available on internet, right? If you have a private subnet and if you still want to access S3 buckets, right, then you have to choose this. Okay, then you have to choose this, but ignore that. You don't need that. Enable DNS host names, select yes, and then you have something called as hardware tenancy. I hope you guys remember where we have used this tenancy earlier, right? If you guys remember this, right, when we are launching an instance, right? When we are launching an instance, when I select the AMI in the next screen, there was something called as tenancy, right? Normally, all of your machines are in shared tenancy until unless you specifically select for dedicated tenancy, right? Now I'm creating a different network itself, a separate network, right? So under this separate network, if I'm going to select the hardware tenancy to be dedicated, so what's going to happen is whenever you launch a machine in this subnet, right? Whenever you launch a machine in this subnet, so once after I create this subnet or this network, this VPC, under this drop down, I'm going to see 2. Right now it shows me only one VPC, right? Because I have only one VPC. After I create this second VPC, under this drop down, I'm going to see 2 VPCs, right? So I can launch a machine in this IP address range or the IP address range that I'm creating now, right? So once, if I'm going to choose dedicated here, and I'm going to choose my second subnet here, right? Even though if I select share tenancy also, my machine is going to be launched in a dedicated tenancy, right? This is going to override your selection here. Okay, keep that in mind. So if you want to create a VPC now, all you have to do is you have to click on create VPC. Okay, so now if I look at my VPCs, I have a VPC created, right? This is the VPC that is created. Now, right now, what we will do is we'll come back to this screen, but before that, what we'll do is VPC dashboard. We'll launch a EC2 instance in the second VPC that we have created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on launch EC2 instance. Amazon Linux AMI, that's fine with me. Or T2.micro, even that is fine with me. Now if I look at my drop down, right? Now if I look at my drop down, I have two options: the default VPC or the VPC that I have created, right? So I'm going to choose this. Now it's going to ask me which subnet, right? If you guys have noticed, I've created only one subnet so far. So that's the reason there is only one subnet here. And whether you want a public IP address, yes or no. By default, when you create a new VPC, public subnetting is disabled, right? If you want to have a public subnet to your public IP address to your machine, select this, right? Now I'm going to click on add storage, tag instances, configure security group, right? Now if you want to choose an existing security group, there are no security groups, right? There are no security groups here. But when I was creating instances, I was launching security groups, right? When I was earlier creating instances, I was launching security groups. I was launching my own security groups. What you have to remember here is security groups are per VPC, right? If I have a security group in one VPC, the same security group is not going to be there in another VPC, right? The security groups are also with respect to VPC, right? So under this security group, I don't have any under this VPC, I don't have any security groups created yet, right? If you want to create a security group, either you can click next review and launch, it's going to create a security group, or you can go for an existing security group. As I don't have any security group, I'm going to select this. If you want to give it a name, you can give it, say SSH, and I'm going to say SSH. I'm going to say SSH. And ICMP, for example, right? You can have some description if you want. SSH and ICMP. So what is it? What is the traffic that you're going to allow? I'm going to allow SSH traffic. I also want to ping, right? So I'm going to say all ICMP traffic. I'm going to say anywhere, right? I don't have to explain this to you guys now. So click on review and launch. Click on launch. I have this key pair. Click on launch instance. The requested configuration is currently not supported. The requested configuration is not correctly supported. What went wrong? Go back to the previous screen. Let's start again. Click on launch instance. Amazon Linux AMI. The general purpose T2 micro instance. We're going to launch one instance. We want to choose it in the second VPC. Subnet. I want a public IP address attached with this. Right. Everything else looks same. Everything else looks good. Add storage. tag instance security group. As I've ran through this widget already, so this is there. Review and launch. Launch. Use the kicker. Why does it say this? Requested configuration is currently not supported. Oh, I think while creating the VPC I made a mistake, so let's go back to that. While basically it says I cannot launch my instances in a dedicated tenancy. So while creating this, what did I do? I've set tenancy to dedicated, right? So I'll have to modify that. Not sure if I can modify that now. I cannot modify that. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete the VPC. I'm going to delete the VPC. That's fine. It's very easy to delete the VPC. Just click on yes, delete. So you're going to launch the VPC again. Bear with me. My mistake here. I should have selected shared or the default. And that VPC is gone. I'm going to create a VPC. I'm going to use the widget. Click on Start VPC widget. Select the VPC with single subnet. And as I was using earlier, I'm going to use 10.1, and I'm going to have to give it a name. I'll say public only, and I'm going to click only, and it's going to be 10.1.0.0, and it's going to be a subnet of 10.1.1. Subnet is going to be this, and availability zone. If you leave it, it's going to pick one of them, but I want to specifically choose this, and I'm going to say public subnet for this one, and I'm going to leave that default subnet as none. I'm not going to mess around with this. We already burnt our hand for that, so I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to click on create VPC. So this has created a VPC. If I go back to my dashboard, I look that I have two VPCs, right? So let's come back here. Let's launch an instance. Launch instance. Amazon Linux AMI. 82.5 instance. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use the public subnet, and I'm going to use a public IP address, add storage, tag instances, security group. If you remember, I've just now created a security group, but that security group was part of the subnet which I have deleted. So that security group is no longer there. So now I have to create my security group again, right? So you can name SSH ICMP, ICMP. Add a rule for ICMP, and from where? From anywhere. Click on review and launch. Click on launch. Now it's able to create a instance. Now if I go back to my console, I click on EC2. Now if I look at it, I have two instances here. This one instance has been running from some time, and this instance is part of this network, right? The default VPC, and the other instance is coming up now, right? So let's connect to this instance and see how it works. Let's connect to the instance that we created. I'm connecting to the instance that was already there. EC2-user. Okay, so So now I'm connected to this instance, the instance that was earlier created. Now if I do if config, you see that this has an IP address of 172.31.41.93. Right? That was all based on the way it was created. Now if I connect to my instance that I've launched just now, I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this, a new session. I'm going to use auth, browse, collaborate.ppk, open, yes. I'm going to log in as user here. So minus, right? Now I do a if config. Look at the IP address that I've got. Right, the IP address that I've got is 10.1.1.219. So it has picked the IP address from the subnet that I have specified, and the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0 as I have created my subnet, right? As I have created the subnet inside this. So this is this instance has got IP address from the subnet and as well as the subnet mask, right? Now if I go back to the VPC, now if I click on now if I click on VPC dashboard, now if I look at it, I have two VPCs, right? The one VPC that has come by default, and there is another VPC that is created, right? And if you look at, there's nothing much here that you can look at. What you can do is you can do a couple of things. We're going to talk about it. So other than VPCs, other than just the VPC, what it has created is it has created something called as a subnet, right? If you go into the subnets, you will see that. So this is a subnet that we have created, right? While creating the VPC, a VPC without a subnet is of no use, right? You cannot launch an instance in a VPC. Sorry, you cannot launch an instance in a VPC. If you want to launch an instance, you have to launch an instance in a subnet only, right? This is the subnet that was created. Even if you look at this, right, it basically says subnet and which VPC it belongs to and all of this information. So again, if I come back to the VPC dashboard, there is another important information like internet gateways, right? So there are two internet gateways. So what does that mean is this is the second internet gate that was created when I launched the public VPC, right? I've launched a public subnet, right? I've launched a VPC with a public subnet. So if the subnet has to access internet, it will need a internet gateway, and this is the internet gateway that it's going to use, right? And it's also going to create something called as route tables, which is very important to understand. So we understood what a VPC is, what an internet gateway is, what a subnet is. Then it also says it has created a route table. If I click on route table, and now if you click on any of the route table, right, a route table is nothing but a table, right? A table which says, say for example, erase all of this. So if I have a machine, right? If I have a machine here, and this is in one network. So if I have a network here, and if I have another machine here, and another machine here. So if I have three machines here, or four machines here, whatever the count you want to make, and I have another network here, right? Another network here, and there are a couple of other machines here. There is one machine here, there is another machine here, there are a couple of machines here. Say if this machine has to say ping this machine, this machine has to ping this machine, so it should know, right? Or let's start with the internal network one. So if this machine has to ping to this machine, it should know where say if it has to ping in the same network, where should it go, right? Where should it go to find that machine? When it is internal to the network, it says local, means you don't have to go anywhere. It is whenever an IP address is starting with 10.1, it is local, right? You don't have to go anywhere, it is local. And other than this, other than 10.1, whenever there is a destination is other than 10.1, which is local, it knows, right? So basically it is saying whenever the packet that you are trying to, whenever there is a destination packet other than 10.1, if it has to find, it has to go to something called as an internet gateway. So what we are basically saying is for this network, we have attached a connection, right? We have attached a small connection, internet gateway, and that is connected to internet, right? So what we are basically saying is for this, for all of these machines in all of these machines are in one subnet, right? So all of these machines, they know if, say if it has to ping to another machine in the same network, it knows it is local. But if it is not local, if somebody is trying to say ping www.google.com from this machine, so that www.google.com is not local to this network. So how will it work? How will this machine should know that this has to go to the internet? That definition is here. Basically, what this route table is telling it is, whenever somebody is trying to go to a local IP address, look internally. Whenever the destination is not this, send the packets to internet gateway, right? So whenever somebody is trying to type in ping www.google.com, this machine knows that that is not local. So what it is going to do is it's going to immediately throw the packets at this gateway, right? And then this gateway is going to decide what to do with the packets, right? So that is what basically this route table is saying you. Okay, and it is associated with one of the subnet that we created, and that's all, right? So that's pretty much it with uh, route tables, right? And there are some other route tables which are created by default when you create it, right? So these are for the this route table is for the VPC, and this route table is for the subnet that we created, right? Okay, all right. So that is with the what do you call a a public subnet. And if you look at if you look at it again, when you create a VPC, you get a VPC, and we have also created a subnet, and it has also created a routing table, and it has also created a internet gateway, so that we are able to connect to internet, right? Then it has also created something called as DHCP option set also, right? So whenever a new machine is going to come up, so what should it have? What's the information should it have? Will be defined in DHCP option set. Okay, we're going to come back to it later. It's not very important. So what we are going to do is we are going to go back to VPC dashboard, and we are going to click on this again. Remember what we have is 2 VPCs, 5 subnets, 3 route tables, 2 internet gateways, right? Now we are going to launch some more one more VPC. Then this count is going to change, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to click on start VPC visit, and this time what we are going to do is we're going to use this, right? This time what we are going to do is we're going to use this. So this is like VPC with public subnet and private subnet. So my VPC that I'm going to launch is going to consist of a public subnet as well as a private subnet, right? So what we are doing is we are launching a VPC. This is my VPC. I'm going to create 2 networks, right? 2 networks. Under these 2 networks, this is my internet. Only this one network is connected to internet. This network is not connected to internet, right? Say if I have a EC2 instance here, if I have a EC2 instance here, if I have a EC2 instance here, and I have another EC2 instance here, I have multiple EC2 instances, for example, right? So if these machines need to go to internet, they can go ping to internet and come back, because this subnet has a routing table which points at internet gateway. But this subnet cannot go to internet at all, because this doesn't know about this internet gateway, because the routing table attached to this subnet doesn't have information about this internet gateway. But say for example, I have to patch this machine. How am I going to do? For that, what you're going to get is in this wizard itself, right? In this wizard itself, what you're going to get is something called as a NAT instance, right? So what this NAT instance does is, say for example, this is a NAT instance. Okay, say this machine has to go to internet. What it is going to do is, it's going to go to this NAT instance, and this NAT instance in turn is going to do something called as network address translation, and then it's going to send the packets to internet, right? And say this machine is trying to say it's trying to ping www.google.com. So it's going to go to this NAT instance. This NAT instance will convert the packet that is coming in. It will remove source as this machine, and it will make the source as this machine and send it to internet. And when it receives, again it will take it and again convert the destination from this machine to this machine, and it's going to send it. So this NAT is going to act like an intermediary between your internet and this private network, right? So this NAT instance is important here. Okay, and another important thing is, say if I have my laptop here, right? If I want to log into this instance directly from internet, if I want to log in, I'll not be able to log in. This is not going to work, right? This is not going to work because this instance, there is no gateway attached to this subnet. So this network is a private network. Okay, but if this instance wants to go to internet, it can. Nobody can come from internet directly to this instance, but if this instance wants to go and talk to internet, it can, provided it has a NAT instance here. Okay, so let's look at this. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose this option, select, and what is the network? What is the network that you want to create? That is a question it is asking me now. So the network that I want to create is 10.2.0.0/16, right? 10.2.0.0/16 network is what I'm going to create, and you have to give a network name. I'll say pub private. I'm going to create a public and a private subnet. So to indicate what I'm doing, I said pub priv 10.2.0.0. This is only for my identification. And what is going to be a subnet under this, right? So I'm going to create a subnet like 10.1.0.24. This will be my public subnet, right? And what will be the availability zone? You can choose any of them or leave it, but I'm going to choose US list 1B. And what is the name of this public subnet? It's going to be public subnet plus this one, which will help me easily identify. Okay, and what is going to be a private subnet? A private subnet is going to be 10.2.2.0/24, and say for example I'm going to choose the US East 1C, right? And again the name I want to put it as this. Okay, as I said, it's going to launch a NAT instance also, right? So what is the NAT instance size you want? That is what it is asking. The default, the smallest NAT instance that you can have is m1.small. So we are going to go with that. And if you want to associate a key with the NAT instance, just in case if you want to log in, you can select that. Leave everything else default. Create VPC. This time around, it's going to take a bit longer time, right? And if I look at my current instances, I have 2 instances, right? I have 2 instances, but now it's launching a m1.small instance. It's launching a m1.small instance. is doing all of the stuff, so we just have to wait, right? So now if I look at your VPCs, I have three VPCs. One is public only, one is public private VPC, and if I go to my VPC dashboard, I can look at that. Now I have three VPCs, 7 subnets. Earlier I had 5 subnets. Now I have 7 subnets. Now I have created one public subnet and one private subnet. Now I have created for the public subnet. I've said I need a public subnet, right? So when I set a public subnet, obviously it has to be connected to a internet gateway. So that's the reason it has created an internet gateway, and it also has created a couple of routing tables. We'll come back to it. Now let's look at what's going to happen. Now, however, it's going to launch a NAT instance also, right? So without wasting any time, what we'll do is we'll try to create a instance, right? So Amazon Linux AMI, configure everything as it is, and here earlier we launched an instance in this subnet and we're able to connect to it, right? Earlier we launched an instance in this VPC, public only VPC, and we're able to connect to it fine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the instance in this public private VPC. Under this, I'm going to launch an instance in a public subnet, and I'm going to get a public IP address. Next, add storage. Next, tag instance. Configure security group. Again, you get an option to choose. Right, I'm going to leave the name as it is. I'm not going to change anything as such. If you want, you can change it. Best practice is always to change it. But I'm being a bit lazy now. I'm not doing it. So I'm going with ICMP traffic. Click on review and launch. Click on launch. Keyword that I'm going to use. Launch instance. So I've launched an instance. Right. So now I have launched an instance in the public subnet. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch another instance. I'm going to launch another instance, but this time I'm going to launch in a private subnet. I'm going to launch my instance in public private, and I'm going to launch this instance in private subnet. Right? I'm going to enable this. Now what I'm saying is, even though my instance is getting launched in my private subnet, I want a public IP. Just to show you that it's not going to connect. Tag instance security group. Add a rule. All ICMP traffic. Anywhere. Launch. Instance. Right. Now we have multiple instances now. If I go back to my instances, now we have 5 instances. This instance has been running from ever. This instance we have recently created in our public VPC, right? In public only VPC. This instance this instance was created when I was launching the VPC using the wizard. This instance I have created, and this instance is part of my public private VPC. But this instance is in my public subnet, right? This instance is in my public subnet. Now if I choose this, if I try to connect to it, new session, if I'm trying to connect to it, collaborator.ppk, there it is. What happened? Duplicate new session. I think I made some mistake there. So let me use this again. SSH auth house. Collaborator.ppk. Click open. EC2-user. Right now I'm able to You guys look at carefully. Now I'm able to connect to this instance 10.1.1.219. Right, this is the instance I'm able to connect to it because this instance is in a public subnet. Right, now I have another instance which is in a private subnet. I know I have launched this instance in a private subnet. Okay, let me try connecting to this instance. Let's check if you are able to connect to this instance. Okay, for that, what we're going to do is we're going to choose this, and what we're going to do is we're going to open another SSH session. So it's a new session. I'll use this key. I'll use the key collaborator.ppk. Click open. Click open. Right. Actually, there is no way you will be able to connect to this instance from internet because this instance was launched in a private subnet, right? So let's go back to here, and if I look at my subnets, right? If I look at my subnets here, right? So basically, I've launched the second instance. Where did I launch it? Launch it here, and if I look at the route table associated with it, it clearly says. Let's look at this one first, right? If you look at this one, what's happening here is 10200 is local, so it knows that 10200 is local. It understands that, and anything other than 102 is going to send the traffic to internet gateway. So what it is doing, if you want to look at the picture, this is my VPC, right? And if this is my subnet, and if this is my EC2 instance inside the subnet, and this subnet is 10.2.0.0, right? This subnet is 10.2.2 or 10.2.1, right? Something like that. But this VPC has a internet gateway, right? So what happening here is this machine knows that whenever somebody is trying to say ping www.google.com, which returns, say we'll assume it as, which returns 8.8.8.8 as IP address. So it knows the destination is not 10.2, the destination is 8888, for example, 8.8.8.8, right? So it knows that, and what it does is it sends the traffic to this internet gateway. Okay, so what's going to happen is whenever somebody is going to type in www.google.com, it is going to send the packets here, and this internet gateway is going to send the packets to internet. Right? This internet gateway knows how to connect to internet, so this is going to happen. But what I have is a private subnet, right? So this instance, if my laptop is here, for example, if my laptop is here, now I can directly also go through the internet and connect to my instance. That's what I've done, right? I've connected to my instance in a public subnet. But if I want to connect to instance in private subnet, right? I have an instance here. Because this subnet has no connection to this internet gateway, I will not be able to connect to this instance through this internet gateway. So there is no way I can connect to this my private instance. If I want to connect to this private instance, what I have to do is I have to log in into this instance. From this instance, I should be able to connect to it. Let's see how to connect to it. Right. So let's connect to it. For that, right. So for that, what I have to do is I have to copy the. Let's go back to our EC2 instance and let's see what we have done so far. Okay, this is getting confused. This makes it easier. So this instance is in a private subnet, right? this instance is in the public subnet. So now let's connect to this instance first. It is not connected already. It is not connected here, I guess. Okay, it's not connected here. So let's connect to. If you guys are not understanding this, fine. Just read about it again and come back to it. Then it will all start making more and more sense. This is a bit of a complex topic, I agree, but that's fine. You have to bear it out. Collaborate.pk. Right. So now I'm in my private machine. Sorry, now I'm in my public. Now I'm in my public subnet. Right. If I want to connect to my private subnet, I can do that. Right. All I have to do is I have to take this IP and do a SSH. Right. So it is giving you a SSH session, but I may not be able to connect to it actually because I don't have the key inside this machine. Right. So let's upload the key and try to connect to it. My WinSCP. Right. WinSCP is basically a product, a software, which can help you copy a file from a Windows machine to a Linux machine. Right. So all I have to do is I have to click on the IP address here, and user is going to be my username. Click on advanced. So I have to specify the key, right? So authentication, private key file, collab.pk. Click OK. Click log. Yes. So it has opened up the session. If I go back to my desktop, this collaborate dot. I have the PEM file. Oh no. I need a PEM file from a Linux machine. If I have to connect, I need a PEM file. I'll not be able to connect using the PPK file. So I'm just searching for the PEM file. I have it. I don't have the PEM file here. So let me look at if it is there in my downloads. I have my PEM file here, so I'm copying my PEM file. The PEM file has been copied. I no longer need this session. So now if I have to connect to my machine in my private subnet, say I'm logged into my web server. Now if I want to log into my application server, obviously I have to log into my web server. Only then I'll be able to connect to it. Now if I do a ls-s, I have a collaborator.pem file here. Now if I have to connect to it, I have to do this ssh -i ec2-user at the private IP address of this machine. Now if I do this, no, like this, I'm just looking at it, ssh-i. That is what I did. So what's wrong with that? Oh, I did not specify the key name here. It says there are many permissions on here, so I have to change permissions on this file. I have to make it more secret. So chmod is a command to make it more secret. Right now, if you look at it, I'm in 10.2.119, which is nothing but my private machine. Right now, if you want to understand, so what I have done is to connect to this instance. First, I logged into this instance, right? Then I logged into this instance, right? So what it is basically saying is, I cannot. This machine has no internet connectivity, right? If I'm able to connect to this machine directly, then that means it has internet connectivity. But this machine has no internet connectivity because the subnet has no information about the gateway. Okay. So now if I want to say install a package, for example, sudo minus, right? Now if I want to say ping www.google.com, right? It might happen, it might not happen, just because if I'm going to say yum install minus y http, it's not happening. But what exactly happens here is you need to look at the visit again. If you click on start etc visit, right? You look at this diagram, it says all. So if you want to go to internet, right, it will, from this private networks, the packet will go to the NAT instance, and from this NAT instance, the packet is going to go to internet. The same thing is there in the routing table also. If I look at my subnet, right, this is the public private subnet. This is my private subnet, right? This is a subnet that we should look at. And if I look at the routing table here, it clearly says 10.2 is local. Anything other than that, ENIF, this is the instance ID. If you look at this instance ID, this will be the instance ID of my NAT machine. NAT machine that was launched by the wizard, right? So what it is basically saying is anything anything 10 to take it as local, but if it is not 10 to send it to my NAT instance. So NAT instance is going to send the traffic out of my network. Okay. Hopefully you guys have got it. Okay. Now, now if you look at it, now what all we have done so far? What all we have done so far? Okay. What all we have done is we have created a one network, right? This network is 10.1.0.0. Under this, we have created one subnet, right? Then we have created another network, right? And this network is 10.2.0.0, right? Under this 10.2.0.0, what we have done is we have created two subnets, right? And even say if this is the internet, right? If this is the internet, so we have internet gateway attached to this, right? And we have another internet gateway attached to this network, and these two subnets, this subnet is connected to internet, and this subnet is also connected to internet. Okay, and what we also have done is we have also launched a NAT instance, right? The wizard has also created a NAT instance, and if any of the instance in here in this subnet has to talk to internet, it should go through like this and go to internet, because this subnet has an internet gateway connection, so it will be able to do it. Okay, see why my okay. So if you want your connection to work, what you have to do is you have to change the security group rules, basically. Hopefully this should work, right? If after I changed my security group properly, now I'm able to get to internet from my private machine, right? Now I'm able to, if you look at this carefully, now this machine is talking to this NAT instance. This NAT instance is taking me out of this network. So this is working as expected, right? Now this everything is working as expected. But what if I want to have these two machines talking to each other, right? If you look at it, I have three machines here right now. I have a machine in my private subnet, or let me log out of this private subnet. Now I have a machine, one of the public subnets here, and I have another machine here, right? Now if I do a sudo su minus here, right? Now if I want to ping, right? Ping 10.1.1.219, right? This is 219, right? This is 10.1.1.219. These two are my networks. I know these two are belongs to my network, but my own VPCs. But there is no connectivity between these two networks. If I want to establish connectivity between these two networks, what I have to do is I have to create something called as VPC peer connections, right? Only after that you do these two machines can communicate to each other. How do you do that? We'll look at it. Okay. When you come back to VPC dashboard, right? Yeah, we'll just have a quick recap. VPCs we know, internet gateways we know, subnets we have looked at, route tables we looked at, right? Then you have something called as network ACLs, right? So if you want to read about network ACLs, I would definitely encourage you guys to read about network ACLs, or I don't want to explain that stuff here. It's already very complicated. If I go to include network ACLs, it's going to get even more complicated. So I don't want to go into that section here. Say for example, I'll try to explain this graphically, right? Say if this is my VPC, right? If this is my VPC, normally it will have a routing table. Before reaching your subnet, right? Before reaching your subnet, there is something called as network ACL. So this is a security group. This is the same like your security group. How you define which port should be allowed traffic? Where did that go? Right here in security group, if you remember, you define your inbound rules, outbound rules, right? In the same way, network ACLs are also going to work at the same way, but the only difference is they are before your subnet, right? So if a packet is coming in from a internet, it has to go through this routing table. Basically, it doesn't have to go through this routing table. It has to go through this network ACL, subnet, security group, and then it will reach your instance. This is another layer of security, right? I don't want to talk about network ACLs now, right? So you have that, and by default, the inbound route says allow all traffic. By default, the rule is allow all traffic, right? And it's not denying any traffic. Outbound route is also same. By default, it is allowed all. And this network ACL is attached to all the subnets of your VPC, right? I have three VPCs, and if you look at network ACLs, each network ACL is normally associated with all of the subnets, right? And you have one Elastic IP, right? So this Elastic IP has been, if I look at carefully, this IP has been associated to this instance. This instance is nothing but the instance of my NAT instance, right? If I say allocate new IP addresses, it's going to allocate a new IP address and this VPC, right? Elastic IPs also are bound to VPCs, right? Let's say release address, it's going to release the address. Now if I come back to VPC dashboard, we understood this. We understood security groups. So we understand what security groups are. Security groups are, as I said, they are specific to a VPC, right? Now let's look at the last concept for today called as VPC peering connections. You have to create a, as I said, if you want to establish a connectivity between these two networks. Now I want to establish a connectivity between these two networks. Right? we were talking about it, right? So I have a web VPC, I have a app VPC. These two are different VPCs. Now I want to establish connectivity between these two. Then I have to do something called as peering connections, right? So for that, I can come here, click on create VPC peering connections, right? Give a name, say my peer. So we have to select which VPCs, right? Select peering with. So with peering, what you can do is you can also peer with somebody else's network connection also. If you know what other account VPCs, you can even do that. But for now, I'm going to do peering between two of my VPCs. If I'm going to select another account, I have to give the account ID and the VPC ID, then it's going to happen. But for now, we are going to go with two of my accounts, right? So I'm going to say create, right? As soon as I click OK, now it says it has created a VPC peer. All I have to do is I have to click on accept, right? That's what it's going to say. It's going to create a connection between two networks. Click on yes, accept. Your VPC peering has been created, right? Now will I be able to ping? Now will I be able to ping from this network to this network? Will I be able to? No, not yet. You have to do one more step before it works. So what that step is, you have to edit your route tables. Okay, you have to edit your route tables and say 10 dot whenever somebody types in because if I go back to my VPC dashboard again and if I look at my subnets, now we want to establish connectivity between these two subnets, right? Now we want to establish connectivity between these two subnets. So what you have to do is you have to select one of those, select the route table, click on edit, right? Not here, sorry, not here. So you have to cancel, go to this route table, click on edit, add another route. So what is this route is going to be 10.2.0.0/16, right? So it should send it to this peering connection. Just I click save, right? Now what is happening? If you guys carefully notice 10.1.0.0, it knows 10.1.0.0 is local, it knows that, right? If it is 0.0.0, go to internet, use the internet gateway and go to internet. If it is 10.2.0, use the peering connection to get to this. I've defined that. Now will I be able to ping? Not yet, right? So what you have to do is one more step is that. So for that, again come back here, go to this public subnet, right? Go to this route table, click on this route table, click on edit, add another route 10.1.10.1.0.0/16 and choose the peering connection. Click on save. Now will you be able to ping? See, as soon as I added the peering connection, the ping is working, right? As soon as I added the peering connection, now what I have done is I have established connectivity between two of my private subnets or two of my subnets, not the default. Sorry, what I've done is I have established connectivity between two of my VPCs, right? I have established a connectivity between two of my VPCs. I'm able to do that. Okay. This is how your VPCs are going to work, right? This is how your VPCs are going to work. And Any questions so far? We have covered a lot. I don't know how much you guys picked up, but we have covered a lot. Okay, good. Okay, so we have created VPCs, right? And we have looked at subnets and all of this stuff. So if you don't want to use the wizard, if you don't want to use the wizard, you want to create your own. If you want to create your own VPC, you can do that. No hard and fast rule that you have to use. You have to use only wizard. You don't have to use that. If you want to create your own VPC from scratch, you can do that. Say all you have to do is you have to click on create VPC, and you have to give a name to it. Say I'm going to say manual VPC, and also I'm going to give a tag to it 10.3.0.0, and my CADR block is going to be 10.3.0.0/16 tenancy default yes create. So as soon as I create a VPC, now if I go back here, right, I have 4 VPCs, right? But for this VPC, if I look at carefully, I don't have any subnet. A VPC without a subnet is useless, right? So if I have to use that VPC, I have to create a subnet. So for that, I'll again come back here, click on create subnet. Now give a name tag, say public under manual. Manual I'm just giving for me to indicate that it is part of this manual VPC that I've created. Availability zone, you have preference. If you don't have any preference, that's fine. But this should be 10.3.1.0/24, right? Anything that you can give. If you know about a bit of subnetting, you'll understand this. Click on yes create. Now, if I go back to my VPC dashboard, as soon as I create a subnet, it will automatically create a route table also, right? If I go back to my subnet, if I click on public manual, you see a route table also, right? Now, if I'm going to, what I've done so far is, if I come back to this picture, I hope you guys understood all of this. So I'm just erasing this. What I've done so far, I have created a VPC, then I have created a subnet, and in this subnet has a routing table. The routing table says simply 10.3.0.0/16 is local. Right now, if I launch an instance in here, this will not have any connectivity to internet because this subnet or this route table doesn't have information about the gateway, okay, internet gateway. If I want to make this subnet talking to internet, what I have to do is I have to create an internet gateway, right? Click on create internet gateway. If you want to give any name tag for you to understand it easily, right? I've given a gateway. Now I have to attach this to a VPC, right? Attach to VPC. Which VPC you want to attach? As there is only one VPC without internet gateway attached, that's the reason it is populating this list. Now if I click yes, attach. Now what I've done is I have attached a internet gateway, right? Now there is an internet gateway also to my subnet. But if I launch an instance now, will I be able to talk to internet? Not really, not yet, because the routing table attached to this subnet still doesn't have information about. I go back to my subnets, and if I look at this, my routing table, this routing table still has no information about the internet gateway. If I want to do that, I have to go into routing tables, I have to check this out table. Click on edit, add a route, and I can specify 0.0.0.0, that is internet, anything, any traffic other than this local, send it to my internet gateway. I save this. Now if I launch an instance here, this will be able to talk to internet, right? So we have seen through the wizard as well as we have seen through how do you do it using a manual steps also, right? So do you guys have any questions? Okay, that's fine. So if I want to create a DHCP option set, right? We have created all of these things, right? Let's also create a DHCP option set. Say manual. So whenever say if you look at it, whenever I launch an instance, I get a IP address automatically. This is nothing but a DHCP IP address. And if I look at do a host name minus F, right? Normally this will display your fully qualified domain name. It's automatically coming as EC to internal, right? If I don't want this domain name, I want my specific domain name. Say I can say something like example.com, right? And what should be your DNS name server? If you want a specific DNS name server, something like this. Anything that you think is your DNS server, you can give it. So whenever this DHCP is going to give information to the client, it's going to say this is your DNS server, this is your domain name, and all of this information, right? Just if you don't have anything else, just click on create. So we have created a DHCP option set also. All right, so if you come back here and if you edit on DHCP option set, you get to choose your option set. Okay, I'm going to choose this. It's going to use the option set that I have created, right? All you have to do is you have to come here, click on edit DHCP option set, and then it's going to do it, right? And any of the VPCs that you select or any of the subnets that you select, right? When we are launching an instance, if you guys have noticed it carefully, right? When I'm launching an instance, right? If I select the VPC that I've created, for example, this one, this is coming subnet setting, use uh, public IP is automatically disabled, right? But for my default VPC, it is normally automatically enabled, right? If I want to enable a public IP address association also automatic, then what I have to do is I have to click on subnet actions, modify auto assign public IP. If I check this, the next time I try to launch us. Let's do it for this one, so that it will be easy for us to see what we are doing. Modify. I do this. I click on save. Right now, let's cancel this and let's start this again. Launch. It's on Linux. Micro. Now, if you look at it, enabled. This is because we have modified this. Okay. Okay. So what else to look at? Edit DNS post name are fine. I think I'm pretty much done. If you guys don't have any questions, I think I pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover today. Any questions? We also looked at peering connections, network ACLs. As I said, they are a bit both the normal. They are at the network level. The default rules are allowed, and the security groups and all of the stuff. we are not going to look at VPNs because we don't have that hardware here, so we're not going to look at that. Any questions before we wrap it up for the day? Okay, I assume no questions. Bhavik, any questions there? I have no questions as well. If you guys have any questions, you can ask me tomorrow as well. But for today, we are done. All right. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow then.